Y'all go ahead and turn to Matthew 5, 6, 8. We got into last week. I want to do something. I got a phone call last night from a buddy back home that we worked together. We coached high school ball together, and he went to the church. So I want to shout out to the legendary Jerry Dean. Y'all make Jerry Dean feel at home. I'm trying to get him to come over here, at least for a Braves game. Because if we're watching the same game, then we're texting each other. We should bunt here, throw the curveball here, hit and run, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, Jerry called me. I hadn't talked to him in a while, so he said he'd be watching today. It's amazing how many folks, and this is, I think, in a lot of places, but they just can't find anybody that teaches. They find a lot of preaching, and they're getting preached at a lot. But there's not always a lot of substance. And so I hope we fill that niche here. A lot of things we don't do well, and I don't know if we do the teaching well, but we're giving it a shot. So if you're accustomed to the 3 bullet point sermon and some fluff and a cheerleading message to get you out the door, then you're in the wrong place. But we still want you to stay. We hope to get you converted. So last week, we got into the first 3 Beatitudes. I want you to remember that there are 3 groups of 3. There are 9 Beatitudes. 3 groups of 3 triads, we call them. They all work off of each other within the 3, but then those 3 tie in together also as a block, and then everything that Jesus says later in the Sermon on the Mount also builds off of this. We've seen that Jesus now, we call it the Sermon on the Mount, because he's gone to a high place where he begins to teach. And that's so important. That's so symbolic for the people there to whom he's speaking in the immediate audience. Because he's going to be linking all these teachings to Torah. And in this way, those people there, the vast, probably 99.9% are Jews. First of all, you have the main audience is the disciples at this point. And probably some stragglers begin to come up and start filling in. But to them, if you've got someone teaching Torah on a mountaintop, then for us, at least, we all start hyperlinking, all right? Because who did that? Moses. And so Jesus now can be seen as a new Moses, which is part of the pattern we talked about in the last series we did. So Moses was on top of the mountain where he got the instruction of Torah from God, and he brought that down to where he communicated it to the covenant people. And Jesus is doing the same thing. So both instances are Torah and a new covenant, all right, where the hearers are expected to see a difference in the way God's people are to live and the way the world lives. Because the Torah, if you pay attention to Torah and you pay attention to other ancient Near Eastern law codes, there are some things that are similar, but there are a bunch of things that are different. And so Israel as a nation was to be a beacon of light to the surrounding nations to see that, and they were to be different. They were to be seen as different. And if they lived according to the covenant, they would have been seen that way. Now, sadly, what happened is they began to look like all the nations around them. They began to take up the ways of the world. Now, Jesus is coming and doing the same thing, using the same scriptures, but he's going to up the ante in so many ways as he's teaching. But to the people that are hearing him, we talked about this last week, he was doing something different than anybody else. He spoke with authority, and he would say stuff like, "You've heard it said this, but I say that," which is, that'd get you in trouble, all right? Is to be the equivalent of someone in America saying, "Well, the Constitution says this, but I say this," which they're actually doing that a lot of times now, unfortunately. But, it would have, 100 years ago, that would have gotten you in a lot of trouble. So Jesus is doing the same thing. He's coming down, he's on a high place, and he's talking about Torah, and he comes straight out of the gate by declaring that the people of his kingdom are to turn around. The English is rendered repent, but we've talked about the religious baggage with that. All right, we'll talk about some more religious baggage with some words today. Because when we hear that, especially if you grew up in the South, then that means you better start crying, get on your knees, and feeling sorry for all the bad stuff you did. All right, but it's so much more than that. Because this is not like, well, you did this and you did this. This is turn around, is what the word literally means. You've got to walk against the grain. You've got to swim upstream. You got to, to quote Jim Croce, you got to spit into the wind almost. All right? And everybody else is going to see you as crazy. But this should communicate to us that living as God's imagers won't be easy, and it's not going to be popular. Because when you're going upstream, you're seen as not only being different, but also rocking the boat. If you're in the Navy and you're moving on a ship, you always got to keep your right shoulder against the bulkhead. All right? So when people are running to battle stations, you don't have traffic jams. And you know that. So it's very easy to see who had been on a ship and who hadn't walking down a hall. Because you got people meandering, they're on the wrong side and they're going the wrong. Just imagine if somebody's driving on the wrong side of the road, like the British do. All right? But have them doing that here. Or imagine everybody else is tubing downstream and you're paddling, or you got your little John boat going upstream. You realize everybody's going to stop and look at you as if you're crazy. And in most cases, something probably is wrong with that. But when it comes to Jesus, talking about the kingdom and what the people in his kingdom are like, that's what it looks like, is people that are going the wrong way. So, as we said several times before, it's the difference between the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of Tov and Ra, or good and evil. There's literally that much difference if you have to turn around and go the opposite direction. You're not just fading off at an angle. You're turning around and going the opposite way. So therefore, we should be challenged by what Jesus has to say, at least in some, if not all the instances, because God's ways are above ours. And we're born into a culture, everybody is. And there's certain things you accept, that's right. There's certain things as Christians we kind of fight. But what we probably will see, if we really get into our Bibles, is that there's a whole bunch more that we just grown up with that we think is right, but not necessarily is that way in the eyes of God. So the first three Beatitudes we talked about last week show Jesus refocusing on the people around him. They were poor. They had very few resources or recourse. Those categories that he delineates, the poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek. Once again, we tend to read those as just merely character traits. But in their world, it's more than that. Those things are also status symbols, or the lack of status. All right, so the meek is not just somebody like this, somebody that has nothing. The poor in spirit are not just people that can't or are not pious. All right, we talked about that. All right, what that means. So all of this is more than just the way we tend to read it. So all of those first three Beatitudes, Jesus was generally referring to those of low status. These people are in the majority, but they are also the people most other people don't want around, the people outside of the working poor, because you don't have a middle class. You got just a few rich folks, probably that work for the Romans or are Roman, and then you got everybody else is dirt poor. And so while they're in the majority, they don't have they can't vote. They don't have a representative to call. Whatever justice you may or may not get is going to be gotten at the tribal or village level. And so, though they're in the majority, they have no say about what happens to them. And so I want to qualify this as we go through, because I know the audience here, and I know that what I sometimes hear is, you're just preaching a socialized gospel. Not at all. Because that is the knock. Where all you're saying is just be nice to everybody and help the poor. Things that a lot of us, from a certain political persuasion, think is all of a sudden, the government giving stuff away. I'm not espousing that at all. If there is a problem, the problem is we've abdicated too much of that to the government, and the individuals in the church don't do it. All right? So I'm not teaching, it's not a socialized gospel. I'm not watering the gospel down to just be a nice person and help the poor and you go to heaven. Because there's still the matter of redemption involved in this. All right? So Jesus is not saying that if you do these things, this is a prerequisite. No. To the contrary, he's saying that if you are my people and you have been changed and you've been saved, then this is the fruit. Go back to the tree imagery. that should be seen. Because we've talked about this new kingdom coming, and you still have people today that they think the gospel is just say this prayer so when you die you go to heaven. But Jesus said it's right here. When he's talking, it's right here. It's on the cusp. You're going to see it. And so when he resurrects, what we'll be celebrating next week, boom, it's inaugurated. But then we look around and we tend to say, well, where is it? I don't see it. Well, if you've ever been to the third world and then you come back to America, you see it. All right? You see it in parts. You see it. Is it perfect? No, and it won't be till Jesus comes back. But what we got to understand is if people are living the way Jesus says, then you're going to be a lot closer to it. And you're going to see some boots on the ground stuff happening. And a lot of the problems we deal with that we think can be fixed politically will be fixed. Or you'll be moving a good ways toward it. So as we go through the entirety of all that Jesus says, and you've got to take it all. No cafeteria Christianity here where you just pick and choose, just the mac and cheese and let the vegetables go. None of that. By the way, they said we need fruit for breakfast. I don't know. Who does fruit at breakfast? Okay, some of you healthy people. Yeah, y'all probably eat quinoa too. We'll pray for y'all. I did look in the refrigerator and we got a ton of bacon, so I don't know why you need fruit. Bacon is a fruit, right? Because hogs eat fruit and vegetables, and that turns into bacon. All right. See, it all works together. It's homogeneous that way. All right. So, stay with me on this, because Jesus is painting a picture. And that's why even it still seems somewhat backwards or crazy or unachievable maybe to us. But we're seeing how juxtaposed his kingdom and his people are in comparison to the kingdoms and the people of the world. Because as we talked about last week, you got the word on the front of the Beatitudes, blessed. We talked about the baggage that comes with, all right, in the religious world. It means happy, or those that are living the good life. Ashrei is the Hebrew equivalent, all right? And Jesus sees these people that everybody else thinks of as the dregs of humanity, and he's saying they are living the good life. And I'm sure those people be turning around like, how can you say that? But that's, once again, how God's ways are above ours and how he sees things differently than we would. So why are they living the good life how do you qualify that if nobody else looks at it that way? It's because those in those categories, the meek, the poor in spirit, what have you, he's listing them in the Beatitudes as those who will one day see a change in their status. Of course, now, for those living in that, you think, well, what about now? What about now? Well, that gets to our part. All right? I've talked about that. For sure, now, that will be realized to the ultimate ideal in the New Jerusalem. But think about what it would be like if everyone turned around and began living and really practicing what Jesus is saying. Think about that. Now, as we go through the message, I want that to be hovering around up here somewhere. Because if you want to see those things changed, a lot of those things, if people did this, then they would. And that's the role of the family of God. That's the role of the people who claim to be in the kingdom of God, is taking back sacred space, one soul at a time, one square foot at a time. And this is the way you do it. So the world will truly be much closer to what is described in Revelation 21 if we were to do this. So let's look back again. Let's begin in Matthew 5:3. Blessed, or Ashrei, those that are living the good life, happy, are the poor in spirit. Why? And then the blessing comes, remember, the blessing comes not in the first half of the Beatitude, but in the second. Why? For equals why? Because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Happy are those that are living the good life, are those who mourn, which seems, backwards. Why? For they shall be comforted. Happy, Ashrei, those that are living the good life are the meek. Why? For they shall inherit the earth. They have nothing now, but they're getting the same promise has been given to Abraham. Now you link this with the new covenant and Abraham, that ought to start changing some things in your thinking, maybe even your eschatology. Verse 6, blessed, happy, ashrei, are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Why? Or for they shall be satisfied. Blessed, happy, ashrei, those that are living the good life are the merciful. Why? For they shall receive mercy. Blessed, happy, ashrei, those that are living the good life are the pure in heart. Why? For they shall see God. So we talked about the first three last week. So please see how Jesus continues the theme of lack. Every one of those first three, poor in spirit, meek, mourning, none of us want to be thrown into that category. I don't think. Nobody wants to be living that way. All right, so they're kind of got a negative meaning attached to them because of that. So even though Jesus still sees them as living the good life because of the way everything ends. But the second group, the last three we just read, they can be seen, no matter how you look at them, as being in a positive light. Let's look at verse 6. We're going to see the word righteousness when the Greek, I've been asked to put the Greek and the Hebrew up here, which for me that's hard to do, unless I find it, because it's one thing to know it and read it, it's another thing to type it. Because you have to change the keyboard, and for me that's technical, so it's hard. All right, but the Greek word is dikaiosune, and that's it on the left. You see the Greek. There you go. Now you know how to spell it. But that's the word in the New Testament is translated righteousness, as righteousness. But as we've seen already, many of these words have some religious baggage that can really obscure their total meaning, that to Jesus' audience would have been a little more obvious. So what are we going to do? We're going to do what we keep doing. We're going to take the Greek. We're going to go to the equivalent in the Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint, and then we're going to see what the Hebrew is, because that's what Jesus is quoting from here. So we're going to go to Jeremiah 22:1. I want you to see what's happening. You find the same English word. But Jeremiah 22:1 says this, thus says the Lord, go down to the house of the king of Judah and speak there this word and say, hear the word of the Lord, O king of Judah, who sits on the throne of David. You and your servants and your people who enter these gates. So he's speaking to the king and all those that are in charge, and they're in charge with keeping up the way things are supposed to go. They're in charge of meting out justice and everything else. Thus says the Lord, do justice, and there's your word, righteousness, and deliver from the hand of the oppressor. Now he's going to define what that is, justice and righteousness. You would do well to do this. Whenever you read the word judgment in your Bible, our idea of justice is much more akin or close to what the Bible means. So for the most part, you can substitute justice for judgment, whether it's Jesus or doing it or not, and you're going to be a lot closer to the ideal. So you're going to see what doing justice and righteousness is. And deliver from the hand of the oppressor him who has been robbed. And do no wrong or violence to the resident alien, the fatherless, and the widow, nor shed innocent blood in this place. For if you will indeed obey this word, then there shall enter the gates of this house kings who sit on the throne of David. And Jesus is in that house, right? So it makes sense that he goes back to this, that the word goes back to this. Shall enter the gates of this house who sits on the throne of David, riding in chariots and on horses, they and their servants and their people. They are Ashrei. They got chariots and servants and people. Remember, we talked about Queen of Sheba and what she said last week. But if you will not obey these words, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, this house shall become a desolation. And it was judged. Now, you got those two words, English words, justice and righteousness. In Hebrew, all right, justice is mishpat. It's not pat. I won't explain why that is, but it's not pat. Mishpat, mishpat, okay? And then sidka is the word for righteousness. So we're looking for what sidka is using, the way it's used. So you're going to see in this passage, God is speaking through the prophet to the king of Judah, and he tells the king to do justice and righteousness. And here's the thing. When you go back to the Old Testament, what you see is you cannot separate the two. Justice and righteousness are strung together at the hip. It's kind of like the old song, love and marriage go together like, okay. It's like that. Justice and righteousness, you cannot do one without the other. But it shows us what Jesus means by righteousness. Therefore, righteousness refers, and here's the theme, the underlying theme you got to get through today. Because if I ask most people, what does righteousness mean? Oh, right relationship with God. Okay? That's the bigger umbrella answer. What you're fixing to see is because it's got justice and righteousness. And that's the way we're trained to think. This is about me and God. What we miss is that it's about more than that. Because that can't be right if the relationship with others is wrong. You can't be screaming and hollering and running folks out of here, having fights with these folks here or anywhere else, and then show up to church like everything's okay. It's easy to do that because, well, I'm right with God. If you're not right with them, you're not right with God. That's how Jesus ups the ante here. Justice and righteousness. So once you see, what I'm trying to get at is if you take that and work it through the Old Testament, you're going to see that in order to a right relationship, rightness of relationship is more than just us as individuals going to God. It has to do with everybody around us. That's uncomfortable, isn't it? Because we're Americans. We're all about being individualistic. Jesus' culture is more communal, not communist. But it's more tribal. It's honor shame culture. Still see it in the third world today. You see vestiges of it somewhat still in America, but it's not the same. Because we're all about strapping up our boots and getting done. Over there, it works differently. In Jesus' day, it worked differently. So it's not about us. And you're going to see this throughout the next two Beatitudes. That Jesus expands on this, and he's saying, it cannot be just you and me if you and everybody else is wrong. Not in a right relationship. All right. So that's the religious baggage that comes with the word righteousness, because we only think of, or tend to, of righteousness as having to do with our relationship with God. But I just read you, and I can't read all of them, but I'm giving you this as an example, that justice and righteousness has to do with not just that, but this too. Once again, join at the hip. Let's look at verse 6 once again as an example. Blessed, ashrei, happy, those who are living the good life are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And there's that word, sidka, in Hebrew, for they shall be satisfied. And most of us would read this and attribute hungering and thirsting for righteousness as, once again, mainly a personal thing. Let's be honest. You read that and you're thinking, oh, the person just please and gets on their knees and please God, I'm hungering for righteousness. I'm thirsting for it. That's the way we read it in individualistic culture, and that is there. But there's so much more to that. Once again, it's more than just out between us and our relationship with God. We would read it, like I said, as ashrei, meaning those that are living the good life are those hungering and thirsting for righteousness, as defined in Jeremiah. And to most of us, once again, that looks like a personal thing. But it's so much more, because we should strive to be righteous. But what does that mean? Does it mean I got my stuff in order? Y'all better find it for yourself. But that's the way we tend to read. It's the way it's usually taught. You get yourself right with God. You get down here right now and do that. But it's so much more. Because when we see that hunger and thirst usually refer to a lack, and Jesus has been talking about a lack of something all the way through the Beatitudes. If we see that usually refers to a lack of food and water, we've once again arrived at that lack of something. And so if somebody is struggling for it, it's missing, thriving or thirsting or hungering for it, it's missing. What I'm getting at here is that those who are living the good life are not only seeking righteousness for themselves in their personal prayer time and in their church service and in their giving or whatever. There's so much more than that. They're also seeing that lack that hopefully they've probably seen themselves, but they're also seeing that lack of all these things around them. They see a lack of righteousness or justice and mercy for those around them. A lack of righteousness means there's a lack of justice, there's a lack of love and mercy around them, and they see what others don't have, and it's not just referring to a personal striving to be righteous, it's a striving for the righteousness or the good life for others also. Now, when that is done, when we see it that way, if that was done, we can see that where the world would change, moving closer to the ideal of what we see in the New Jerusalem. Because it's not just folks, I got mine, hope you can get yours, hate it for you if you don't. It's seeing it around. That's why Jesus walks up and he sees the city of Jerusalem and says he weeps. Because he's seeing, not just seeing him, he's seeing what all that's going on there. Can you see now, and this is a recurring theme, can you see how Jesus is moving things from just a personal relationship to one of action that brings us to be better imagers of God as he was, as he's showing us. That's the point. Those who live in this way are living the good life and they will be satisfied. That's the blessing, once again, at the back end, the B portion of the verse. The blessing is in the second half, not in the first half. So this thirsting and hungering for justice, mercy, love, righteousness, all right, going back to Sidka the Hebrew, is more than just me. I got my stuff together. And he's going to build on that. It's about how we get along and react with others around us. We're going to go to Matthew 18 now, 21, to set something up, the next beatitude. We're going to set this up. It says, we should have it up. There we go. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? And this is, in that same question. The Lord says, turn the cheek. What do I do after I turn both of them? Then can I smoke him? That's the way we think. We're looking for the loophole to get back to the way everybody else lives and acts. But so Peter asks, as many as 7 times, that's a good number, and it is a symbolic number of completeness, all right? And Jesus ups the ante. Once again, he says, I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. Ooh, that's like completeness, time completeness, squared, cubed, and all that. And that's just even simple math, 7, I don't know new math, because I don't think it works. But 7 times 70 times 7 is what, 490? Even if you just do that, and that's not what he means here. 490, you're going to quit counting. Unless you're just vindictive and you really want to smoke the guy. You give him 490 shots at 491, boom! That's not what Jesus is saying here. Look at the next verse. Therefore the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king. The kingdom of heaven, which is what Jesus is talking about in the Sermon on the Mount, and now he's giving a parable. Therefore the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. And when he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. Now that's like the kind of money the Congress spends on every bill they write. Nobody can pay for it. We're just hoping nobody comes to collect. All right? This is you can't. That's why 10,000 talents is used. I mean, Caesar himself does. Rome probably doesn't have that much money. So, and since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. 100 denarii is 100 days of wages for your day laborer. Okay? All right, that's 100 days work. That is doable. Maybe not for the poor folks, but it's doable. Point is, it's a large contrast between the kind of money government throws around and this right here. And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, pay what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me and I will pay you. He refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt, debtor's prison. And when his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me, and should you not have had mercy, and that's the reason, because that's the word in the next beatitude. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger, his master, which in the parable, you always got a landlord, a master, a big dog somehow. It's representing the Lord here. And in anger, his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So, Jesus says, also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. And this parable then mirrors what we're going to read in Matthew 5:7, which says, blessed, ashrei, happy, those that are living the good life are the merciful. Why? For they shall receive mercy. And you see this once again, this is what Jesus is paralleling. And that parable does represent this theme. But if we, and this, I'm circling back now. If most of us read this, those that have mercy, we think of it in the vein of just this parable, right? That I should have mercy. All right, this guy owes me some money. I know he's going to have trouble paying it off. So, I'll either, let him extend the time, or I'll just say, don't worry about it. But it goes so much further than that. And that's what Jesus kind of talks about from the heart there. So once again, we read it in that same vein. Well, if somebody owes me some money, I'll forgive them. Or, maybe they said something that I don't like. All right, I'll let it go, which you should do. But there's a nuance here in Matthew. And so the word translated for mercy is the Greek root elos, and it can come out different ways, but it's the same root. So here's the question. The question here is whether or not Jesus is only, you already know the answer to this by now, whether he is only speaking of forgiving someone who has wronged us. Is that all he's talking about? That's the way most people are going to read it. But that then begs the question, how can we forgive someone unless they have wronged us in some way? All right, if I'm losing anybody, just stick with me here. We know about if they've wronged me, I should forgive them. All right, that goes. But then we see some stuff happening in the Bible where people are asking for mercy and they haven't wronged the person they're asking. Now that's something bigger. And it goes beyond just one-on-one, you see. Look at Matthew 15:22. And behold, a Canaanite woman, and this Greek word's the same here. A Canaanite woman from that region came out and was crying, have mercy, Elos, on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon. So now you have an example of someone asking for mercy. She hasn't wronged Jesus. In his humanity, he doesn't know her, and she doesn't really know him. She's obviously heard some stuff about him. She hadn't wronged him. She didn't owe him any money. We aren't told that she called him any bad names. She didn't throw any rocks at him or anything, question his ancestry or anything else. And so what I want to show you here is what do you do? What does mercy mean when someone has not wronged you? Because it gets beyond that one-on-one thing here, as you see. Have mercy. So it's here that we're going to see how many times we see something like mercy as only being the forgiveness given to one who has wronged us. But that's not the case here. But she's asking for the same thing. Jesus would have us not only forgiving those who have wronged us, and I would add those that even think they have wronged us, and I would say you offer mercy to those that they think you wronged them, and you think I hadn't done anything, so I'm not apologizing. Apologize anyway. Stop being a dirtbag. Is that what's keeping them from coming back to church? Is that what's keeping them from calling you? I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not apologizing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because now the relationship is broken. Do you need to sit down and discuss it? Yeah. But we're talking about here, I didn't do anything. Well, I didn't do anything either. All right, so everybody's right and everybody's mad. How does that work in the kingdom of God? You call them up. You have coffee and you say, look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. That's the way that's supposed to be done. All right? And this is kind of along those same lines, is that you're giving mercy to someone that maybe they wronged you, maybe they didn't. But in this case, we're seeing that they didn't. He's showing us here how to give mercy to those who are in need, even those we don't know. And we see the same thing elsewhere. Look at Matthew 20:30. And behold, there were two blind men sitting by the roadside, and they heard that Jesus was passing by, and they cried out, what? Lord, have Son of David. They haven't done anything. And he's still going to show mercy. The point I'm getting at is we cannot read something like this, like Americans do, and it's just me, all right, I'll forgive them. Or in the last beatitude, righteousness, I'm hungry and thirst, because I'm talking to Jesus every day. Have my coffee and read my devotional. And then I don't fool with anybody else the rest of the day. That's a good way to keep from getting angry, is to be introverted and stay in the house and not have to deal with anybody. I get it. But that's not what we're supposed to do. That right relationship is supposed to be taken out and shared and given with others. And we've already seen you can't just, it's not just my little personal thing. That's the problem with America. You leave your religion at home because that's between you and God. No, it's not. It starts there, but it goes way past it. It goes in the workplace. Now, don't go in there slapping them in the head with the Bible and, no. Live the way Jesus is talking. Show them mercy. Be nice. Bring them some cookies or something. Don't bring them quinoa. They'll hate you for that. But you see what I'm getting at here. In these instances, we should once again see that pattern, because these things which Jesus speaks do not only speak to us regarding us personally, forgiving those that have wronged us. They speak of so much more, because Jesus exemplifies how mercy is not just shown to those who have wronged us, but how mercy is to be shown to those we don't even know and don't even have anything to do with their situation, at least not directly. It's not just a personal thing. Jesus is raising the bar on everything, and this is how he sees those as being merciful, as being the ones who are living the good life. Why? Because that is who will be shown mercy. Jesus raises the bar. It's been said that if you commit an adultery, if you go with another woman, you commit adultery. I say to you, if you look on her for that purpose, he's raising the bar. It's not getting easier to live the good life, to live the kingdom life. It's a little harder, especially the way folks dress nowadays. All right? So he's raising the bar on everything, and those people will be shown mercy. Once again, how much closer to the ideal we see in Revelation 21 and 22 would we be if everyone showed mercy as Jesus modeled it? Can we see how we must learn once again to think beyond ourselves when we read the words of Jesus? I got mine. I got it. I did my little thing today. Now I can go about my life. If you're walking past those people and not seeing it, and you see the person like this, I see them walking out, they don't look so well. I'm like, God help them. God help them. You see them in the parking lot. God help them. Stop. If you got something, help them. Pray about it, but help them. Now, like I've said, I'm bad about, if I see folks like that, I'll give them, if I got cash, I'll give it to them. I see two strapping young men standing out there with a sign in the Walmart parking lot wanting money because they're jobless, and they're standing 30 yards from the sign that says, now hiring. No, you're not getting my money. All right? But the mother and the poor and the elderly or whatever, ones that looks like they've had it rough, yeah, they're probably going to get it. All right? And maybe they'll spend it on something they shouldn't. Maybe they won't. I don't know. I can't always guard against that. But the way Matthews uses the idea of elos and the words connected to it implies that merciful action is the concrete expression. I'm quoting here from Davies and Allison. It's the concrete expression of our believing loyalty or the faith in God. It's the fruit. Remember your tree imagery. You can't say, well, I did my devotional. Oh, they're hungry. That is a break in this relationship and the relationship of those around us. Even we don't know them. I don't know the guy. Jesus didn't know the lady. And he didn't know the men. He still showed them elos because it's the right thing to do. Look at chapter 5, verse 8. Blessed, happy, ashrei, those that are living the good life are the pure in heart. Why? For the pure in heart shall see God. Now, I want to say that as you read this, it's easy. It's like, wow, I can't. That's impossible. To do all this is just too hard. It is kind of hard, especially without Spirit, Holy Spirit. But at the same time, Jesus is not talking about this stuff as if it's just an ideal. He's speaking of, because the rest of the message speaks to this. The rest of the Sermon on the Mount, this big block of teaching for the next few chapters, speaks to this as if it's attainable. So therefore, we got to reach for it. But Jesus is steering his people, those that are listening, to a pure heart and what that means. And we've been talking about that word elos. We're going to see the Hebrew equivalent in a second. But remember how Jesus is moving us away from just thinking about, as we think about it, this right relationship with Him, and how He expands it to our relationship with others. Because many of us think that doing religious things, such as our little devotional, such as going to church, worshiping, giving, offering, and all that stuff, makes us good with God. Those are all good things and should be done. They should be priorities. Yes. But it doesn't stop there. That's one being religious. Go to church, do all the, check the boxes, and everybody else on the block thinks you're a total dirtbag. You see, there's a break there. Something's not, there's a cognitive dissonance there. But once again, Jesus is moving us away from that idea. And it's not a new idea. Look at what the book of Hosea says. Hosea 6:6. For I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. And so sacrifices and offerings are good, should be done. What we might term as religious things are good. Jesus never says to not do those things. They are required. But you can't just check the boxes because we see them as being part of our relationship with God and think we're good. Because if you keep reading in Hosea, what you see is that people were making sacrifices at the temple and all the other stuff. It goes on to say, I think it's translated in King James, is they're more interested in building their own sealed houses, which was tiled, wall to wall. They're more interested in that than what's going on, building the house of the Lord. So what you see is their priorities are out of order. They're showing up at the temple, and they're doing the thing, offering the sacrifice. They're doing all those things, and they're saying the right things, and they're praying 11 times a day, and they're saying the Shema, and they're doing all this stuff. But if you read the text there in Hosea, they don't give two hoots in Hades about anybody else but themselves. They'll walk right, just like the Good Samaritan, they'll walk right by that person. Step over them. You don't want to get your shoes dirty. They'll walk right by them on the way to the temple and leave them bleeding in a ditch. And that's what Hosea is. That's what God is saying here. I would rather have steadfast love. Not just love toward God, because that's linked to the love for everybody else, than your stupid sacrifices. He goes, I can't smell them anymore. They make me sick because there's nothing in them. You are emptily, is that right? Empty? You are just being empty and doing the religious things. You're doing what's expected. You're going to church. And it doesn't, once you get outside the four walls, and you're all about God bless you, brother, and God bless you, sister, and all that. Be blessed. Let me pray for you. And get out those doors, and I know what it's like trying to get out on this road, and you're get on the table, push your mouth, screaming and hollering. If that's what we do, then this has been for naught. It's no good. Because there's no fruit to it. They don't care. And it goes back to what we read regarding Jeremiah and the king of Judah. There's no mercy or justice. Saying the right things, doing the right things. The same thing was going on in Hosea's day. And once again, we cannot separate our actions and relationship with others from our relationship with God. You can't have one without the other. Look at what Jesus says just a few lines later in the same sermon, 5:23. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, going to church, so it'll be our equivalent, and there remember that your brother has something against you, and it works both ways, or you have something against them, or even they have something against you, but I didn't do anything wrong really, so they got to get over it. Nope. What does he say? Leave your gift there. Leave your offering. And then go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. We've had families leave the church because of something, yeah. Now, I run enough folks off. I don't need y'all's help. I don't mean to, but I do. I'm not trying to, and I'm not a hellfire and brimstoner. But if in this day and age you can say the word "a" and that offends somebody, whatever it is, and the is, am, or was, were, doesn't matter. But the point I'm making is, it's that little stuff. And was it? Nah, I didn't do anything wrong. That's wrong. Well, I'm good with God. No, you're not. You haven't sought any reconciliation. But it was stupid. Yeah, it is. So why aren't we talking? You wouldn't treat your kids that way. That is stupid. Y'all make up. Hug your sister. Yeah, it's stupid. It is. We're going to sever a relationship over something like that, whatever that is. That's what he's talking about here. Go call them, text them, go drink coffee, something, and then come back. The reconciliation is akin to showing mercy because it's about restoring a relationship. We can't just have a falling out with someone and then say to ourselves, well, we're in the right. Too bad. You're stupid. I'm the righteous one. How does that sound? Jesus is constantly dealing with this issue in his confrontation with the Pharisees. Because they're sticklers. What do? I've tithed. I've got some mint and cumin and garlic and all this, and I'm giving 10% to the temple of all this. And they'll walk right past the beggar. They'll walk right past the widow. They'll walk right past somebody bleeding in the street, as in the parable of the Good Samaritan. And what does he call them? You hypocrites. You're acting. I'm doing all this religious stuff. I'm good. No, you're not. They're not. And that's why. And that's what he's talking about here. So even if they did interact with the poor, they showed disdain. Held their nose up here. Here's $1. Don't spit it on crack. I don't know what it costs, but I doubt you're buying anything for $1. You can't get a stick of gum anymore for that. But they showed disdain and only helped in order that they'd be seen by others. So it is hypocrisy. It's just an act. And then this gets us back to the issue of being pure in heart, which ties back in with the other two Beatitudes we read about today. Because we've seen how Jesus expands these ideas from just that personal relationship with him to how it should relate to the relationship with others. How does this then relate to the idea of a pure heart? Well, if we do good things just because we are told to do so, go hug your sister. Apologize. I'm sorry. Walk away. That sorry heifer. I wish she'd never been born. Have you really accomplished anything? The pure heart does things out of love, because love and mercy and the hunger and thirst for righteousness, I keep wanting to say thunder, the thirst and hunger for righteousness and the feeling the pain of others, as Jesus talks about, it compels them to do so. We've seen it. You see that when I was a kid, they show you all these commercials for, I think it was Care. These children in the third world, and they're standing there with swollen bellies, and the camera, I'm thinking, dude with the camera, give them a sandwich. Help them out, And your heart would break for them, and you would, maybe want to do something about it. To me, now, this is me, and I'm messed up. And y'all know that. But the saddest commercials aren't even those. To me, it's the ones for the dog pound. And it shows the puppy. I can't, I got to turn it. I'm sorry. It's too good. You've done such a good job, I can't watch it. I'm turning it. I don't care what's on the other channel. I can't watch it. I'll sit there and cry. I haven't seen Old Yeller since the first time I saw it. That's 50 years ago. I can't watch it anymore. They shot the dog. That's all I remember. There's something on fire and they bang. I don't remember. Don't tell it to me because it's too sad. I can watch I can watch people get shot all day. That doesn't bother me. You start messing with a dog, and see, that's how messed up I am. I'm just saying. But, that's... Let me get to a better example. If we give our spouse a gift, it's her birthday, it's our anniversary, she has all kinds of other dates she remembers. I'm doing good to remember birthday and anniversary. But it's like, I gotta go get her something. Here. Hope you're happy. And go to our business. All right. Tell me. Is that love? No. That's trying not to get in trouble. And guys, we know how that is because most of us, some of y'all do, and if you do this and you think about it all week and for a week, just be quiet because you're making life harder for the rest of us. But if you do it because, it's her birthday, it's our anniversary, that's real special, and I want to go out and do this and do this and do this and do this. Yeah, cha-ching, 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 I know. But you want to do it. I mean, it's a big deal. Like, honey, I got this for you. Isn't that the way I do? See, she's rebellious. You just won't do right. But I mean, if you do it, you see the difference. Y'all get it. I'm being a little funny, trying to be. But you understand the difference. That's the difference between a pure heart and someone being religious. Compelled to do it because God told me to. I tell that to people. Sometimes I say, I love you. Jesus told me I had to. That's what I say. I'm trying to be funny. But you get it. There's a difference between the compulsion and the really, I'm there. I want to do that. Now, because of all this, what is the blessing on those that we're talking about in this beatitude? They shall see God. Now, think back to the Old Testament. We're about to get out of here. Think back to the Old Testament because people, especially in the Old Testament, people feared seeing God. Why? If they saw him face, they're going to die. You see them, they can't, And it even tells Moses, stick your head in the rock and you'll see my hinder parts. But you can't, what it means is you can't see my glory, full glory, or you'll die. But people were scared of that. And you see that pattern. Let me ask you this. Where does that not happen? Where can someone see God face to face and it not kill them? Old Testament. Revelation is not in the Old Testament. Eden. Adam and Eve. Always go back there. Adam and Eve walked in the cool of the day with God. It's not until they're exiled or harammed to outside the garden and they can't get back in because the cherubim are guarding it that no longer happens. It's after that people can't see God or, because that's the deal. It's all Torah. If you're unclean for whatever reason, you have to go outside the camp and or go through some rituals before you can get back in the camp to go to the tabernacle or the temple because you're not clean. And that's the same idea that you get in Eden. They're outside. They can't get back in. The way is guarded even. All right. So, what we're seeing here, look at this. Look at Revelation 22:1. See what stands out to you. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb, through the middle of the street of the city. Also, on either side of the river, the tree of life. Now, that's hard to wrap your head around because it's in the middle of the street. It's on each side of the river. We talked about the imagery from Exodus there a few weeks back. But you got this tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. So bears fruit year-round, as we are, should be. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be anything accursed, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship him, and they will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. So nobody's getting microchipped in heaven. Okay? That's the imagery. Stop it, stop it, stop it. And I remember back in the day, you're going to get a UPC code. And when microchipping is an old hat, they'll rewrite their prophecy books to say something else. Nobody's getting microchipped in heaven. It means that's who owns you. It's imagery from the slave trade from back then. God is your sovereign. But you see right there in verse 4, they will see his face. Blessed are the pure in heart. Why? For they shall see his face. That's who gets to go. The pure in heart. And so you see the reversal. Once again, you come full circle from Eden prior to the fall to the New Jerusalem revelation. So having a pure heart, which is an attainable goal, is the key, to going back to Eden, the New Jerusalem. So if you go back to the Eden narrative, it removes the cherubim that are standing outside with the flaming sword. You can get back in because Eden is where God resides. You can get back to the presence of God with the gospel. And Jesus is telling his hearers here how to get back to Eden. He's telling them how to live, what turning around actually looks like. Because it's one thing to say turn around. All right, I did. Now walk this way. Walk this way. You know, you got to walk this way. Well, you can't just kind of turn. Well, I turned there and now, no. You got to go this way and it looks crazy to everybody else. But that's the way to Eden. That's the way to the New Jerusalem. So I'm going to leave you with this once again, the thought and/or / question. How would life be here if everyone, or just every one of us, lived this way, imaging God? And that grows, because that's what it's supposed to do. Would not most of the hurting and the pain of this world go away? See, because we can sit there and argue about how to do this and what do you do on the border and you can argue about all that all you want. I don't think there's a blanket answer, regardless of your politics. If we're really going to fix it, what we're talking about here is one person at a time. Because Jesus is emphasizing not just this, but those within my little circle. One person at a time. I would say you start at home, but then work from the inside out, which is what Jesus did. That's what he said. You start at Jerusalem, go through Judea to Samaria, you work your way out in concentric circles. That's how the kingdom grows. But to live it and show that mercy and hunger for that righteousness and see the hunger elsewhere and step into the gap, think of how much better your community, my community, our community would be, our state, our nation, our world. Would things not be much closer what they will be in the new creation? You can't argue that. You might say it's impossible. People will say that. But hey, you got to start somewhere. And that's all he did, was tell us what to do personally. Start somewhere, right here, right there with you. And this is what we're going to see as we continue to read, to absorb, and hopefully model what Jesus is saying. Would y'all bow your heads, please?